Brandon and the Todd Family YouTube video. Wherever you are, whatever you may be doing, thank you so much for making Ref Brandon and the Todd Family part of your day. We always greatly appreciate it if you jump on here live here on this Thursday evening. Feel free to leave a comment in the comment section below. Make sure to give the video a like, a thumbs up. If you're not yet subscribed, please do so and share the video on all social media platforms. Sorry about turning my head, but I have the Clemson baseball game on in the background and I have the volume turned down so it won't interfere with the video. And I was trying to see a little bit of what's going on, but on to tonight's video, where the main topic, as you can tell by the title, is Blue Bloods in college football. Good evening, Keveron. Glad to have you here as always. And what, in your opinion, defines a blue blood in college football? And we'll talk about that coming up here in just a brief moment. But first, yesterday I heard an interview with Charles Barkley, and I've always been a big fan of Charles Barkley. First, I always thought he was one of the most underrated players in the NBA. I don't think he ever got the credit that he deserved for what he was able to do, especially at his size. And ever since he retired from the game, I like the NBA, not like I do NASCAR and baseball and football. But if I turn the TV on and I see Charles Barkley talking, usually I listen, because he always gives you his opinion, doesn't care who likes it, doesn't care who it offends. He just tells you what he thinks. He's not one of those corporate people. And that's why I like him. That's why I can't stand Skip Bayless and Stephen A. Smith. They just say stuff that's outrageous just to get your opinion and see what you say. Charles Barkley doesn't do that. Charles Barkley tells you what he thinks, and if you don't like it, oh well. But he was on the radio yesterday, previewing the soon-to-be NBA playoffs, because most people don't count these play-in games as playoffs, just like most people don't count the NCAA tournament college basketball plus 4 games as actual tournament games. Hey there, Maya, glad to have you here. But he was talking about a hockey player that got his teeth knocked out and came back in and played later on that same game after getting his teeth knocked out. And he said he's always enjoyed hockey, and hockey's probably his favorite sport because of the toughness. And he said he don't think that today's NBA players appreciate that, because back in his day, if he'd have made $25-30 million like these players nowadays do per season, he'd have played basketball 7 days a week. And he has no respect for these guys that can't play basketball back-to-back days. He said, you can't tell me you're in such good shape and yet you can't play basketball back-to-back days. This is a sport that kids play. This is a sport that middle schoolers play. And you're a grown man making $50-60 million and you can't play back-to-back days. And I thought that was pretty interesting that Charles Barkley pretty much called out everybody in the NBA nowadays, because nobody plays back-to-back days. You look at Kawhi Leonard, I think Kawhi's played about 10 games in the last 10 years and yet still makes all kind of money. But on to tonight's main topic. Hey there, Nat. Glad to have you here. Hey there, Digital Circus. Glad to have you here. And Maya and Nat and Digital Circus, I think it's the first time I've seen y'all's names in the comment section. If it's y'all's first time being here, for whatever reason, made y'all stop by the channel tonight, thank you very much. Feel free to give the video a like, a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and share the video on all social media platforms. And the reason why I put that question in tonight's video title, it was not a rhetorical question. I'm actually seriously asking what defines a blue blood in your opinion. And I tell you the reason why I'm asking. In college basketball, anytime you ask people who are the blue bloods of college basketball, they always, Kansas, Kentucky, Duke, North Carolina, always, those are the first few teams that get mentioned. But I saw an article yesterday, and I wished I could find out who put the article out, because then I might could have clicked on it and got a description of how they defined these blue bloods, the way they defined them. But I saw it on one of those social media college football pages, and it just said blue bloods of college football, and it had 4 different categories, a total of 21 teams, so not quite 25 teams, but close. And then it told you what the 4 different categories are, but it doesn't tell you how they defined each category and how they came about getting the solution that they got. So I'd like to know what you think defines a blue blood, because there's a few teams on this list that, in my opinion, shouldn't be on the list. And it also doesn't say if this is in the history of college football or if this is just in the modern era. I'm guessing it's at least the modern era, because there's some teams on this list that if it was just the 21st century, they wouldn't be on the list. And Digital Circus says, finally, someone who can read my name. Some of the lives didn't know how to spell my name. Well, luckily, Digital Circus, I could spell it, but since you spelled it, I don't have to spell it. I just have to pronounce it. And I know it says Digital Circus fan, but I was trying to cut it short and just say Digital Circus, which to me is not very hard to spell or very hard to say. But let's go ahead and get into it. And if you're watching this live or later on, and you hear this list and, the category of each list, if you think you know how they define this, please feel free to let me know. But it's the blue bloods of college football, 4 tiers. But it's only 3 if you listen, because tier 1 has a 1A and a 1B. So it's only 3 numbers, but 4 tiers. Tier 1 is called the bluest of blue. And it only had 5 teams in it. And that's Alabama, Notre Dame, Oklahoma, Michigan, and Texas. Now, seeing that list makes me think that these are the teams that, if you just found an average sports fan and showed them these teams' helmets, they could say, oh, that's Alabama. Oh, that's Notre Dame. And that's what defined this, tier in particular, because if it's based on what you've done on the field, to me, Texas shouldn't be in this list. I know they're a top 5, top 10 team every single year, but they've won 1 national championship, and that's it. So having a helmet that everybody recognizes shouldn't make you the bluest of the blue. But that was the 5 teams in tier 1, which was called bluest of the blue. Now, tier 1B is called Legacy Blue Bloods. Good evening, Eddie. I'm glad you're here, because I'm talking college football, Eddie, and I found an article yesterday that I wish I could find who put the article out, because I would like to click on it and read it and find out how they got these tiers they got and what defines each tier. But I couldn't. I found it, Eddie, on one of those college football social media sites. And a lot of these sites I follow just to keep up with the happenings in college football. In the off season, when I'm trying to watch baseball and, NASCAR and basketball and spend time with the family and still do my wrestling shows and all that kind of good stuff. But, Eddie, it's about the blue bloods of college football, and that's why I posed the question in the comment section. of what defines a blue blood. And it wasn't a rhetorical question. It was me actually wanting an answer because I found this article. And since I couldn't find, who put it out, whether it was a person, a website, whatever, I can't find out how they defined blue bloods. But they've got 4 different categories, but it's only 3 tiers because tier 1 has a 1A and a 1B. And Eddie, you came on just in time before I got into 1B. There's a total of 21 teams, so not quite 25, but close. And tier 1A was called the bluest of the blue. And it had 5 teams, and that's Alabama, Notre Dame, Oklahoma, Michigan, and Texas. And I said that in my opinion, even though I can't prove this because I can't find out who put the article out, that must just be their definition of bluest of the blue for tier 1A must be them saying if you just found an average sports fan or a new sports fan and showed them those 5 teams' helmets, they could look and say, that's Alabama, that's Notre Dame, that's Oklahoma, because if they're just basing it on winning, I don't think Texas belongs in that category because, yeah, they're top 5, top 10 every year, but they've got 1 national championship. And to me, if I say you're the blue, you've been more than average. And I know Texas isn't average as far as their ranking, but they're average as far as when the year comes and goes, they never win anything. But those are the 5 teams in tier 1A, bluest of blue, and tier 1B only has 4 teams, and that's called Legacy Blue Bloods, and that's Florida, USC, Nebraska, and Ohio State. Now, to me, again, just guessing, when you tell me Legacy Blue Bloods, to me that comes across as you're saying these 4 teams are blue bloods based on what they've accomplished on the football field, because those 4 teams have all had, a lot of success in the past. Maybe not so much now because, let's face it, Nebraska's been average for the better part of 25 years, but back in the 80s and 90s, they were the blue blood of blue bloods in college football. So I think 1B, Legacy Blue Bloods, that category, those 4 teams sounds like just 4 teams that you're a blue blood based on what you've accomplished on the football field. And 1A sounds like you're a blue blood based on people recognize your brand, so you're a big name because of that. Doesn't matter what you've done, you're a blue blood because people know who you are. And 1B sounds like you're a blue blood because you've won a lot and accomplished a lot on the field. Now, tier 2 is fringe blue bloods, and it's 6 teams. And fringe blue bloods sounds to me like you're saying these 6 teams aren't quite blue bloods, but if they could have 2 or 3 more really, really, really good seasons, they would go from being a fringe blue blood to an actual blue blood. And again, it's 6 teams. We have Tennessee, Penn State, Florida State, Clemson, Auburn, and LSU. And the weird thing about that is I look at a team like Florida State, and we know how good Florida State was back in the 90s, early 2000s, but we know for the last 10 years, outside of their 1 undefeated regular season a couple of years ago, they've been garbage. So I guess they lost their blue blood status because of that, because, if you'd wrote an article 20 years ago about college football blue bloods, Florida State would either be number 1 or number 2. But the weird thing I thought was, well, why is it that tier 2 fringe blue bloods has Florida State, but yet tier 1B Legacy Blue Bloods has Nebraska? Both of those teams have fallen off a cliff in the last 10 years, but yet Florida State's last national championship is way more recent and not near as long ago as Nebraska's. So how did Florida State lose their blue blood status and go to being a fringe blue blood, and Nebraska still a legacy blue blood when Nebraska hasn't done as much as Florida State has in the last 20 years? At least Florida State has won a national championship this century. Nebraska hasn't. And then tier 3 is elite programs. Hey there, Dark Vulgar, glad to have you here. So sounds like these teams aren't even blue bloods, which is funny because the article is called Blue Blood Tiers, but yet tier 3 is elite programs. And nowhere in that title, in that category, does it say blue bloods, but it also has 6 teams. And these 6 elite programs are Georgia, Wisconsin, Oregon, Texas A&M, Boise State, and Washington. Now, Oregon's always going to be considered elite, but Oregon's never going to be considered a blue blood until they win a national championship. You know, they've came so close so many times, and they're there so much, but they just can't win one. And you can't be considered a blue blood when you can't even win a national championship. So being an elite program is as far as Oregon will ever go until they actually sneak up and win a national championship. Some people think they take a step back this year. I guess we'll find out coming up here in about 4.5 months. But any thoughts on any of this, please feel free to let me know. Let's go ahead and get our dad joke of the day in here. What do lawyers wear to work? Lawsuits. The topic, Dark Vulgar, was blue bloods in college football and what defines a blue blood. You jumped here just in time to miss it, but you can always go back and watch it in its entirety anytime and comment, and I'll see your comment. But it was blue blood tiers, and it was 4 categories, only 3 numbers, because tier 1 had a 1A and a 1B. Good night, Eddie. Thanks as always for stopping by. But I asked a question, Dark Vulgar, in the comment section in the video title before I started, what defines a blue blood in your opinion? Because when I found this article titled Blue Blood Tiers, it just had the 4 categories and the 21 teams, but it didn't have, you know, whoever wrote the article, it didn't say they defined a blue blood, how they came about with these categories, what put each team in these categories, how long the list goes back. It didn't say any of that. So go back and watch it in its entirety and see what you think, Dark Vulgar. But until next time, it's Ref Brandon saying, just like in pro wrestling, life can be over by the count of 3.